What would our world be like if we actually knew that everything was holy now? Can you imagine? I'm going to talk about that a little bit later at the end. So this year, we are working with the theme, Building a Community. And for each month, we've taken a different quality and explored that a little bit deeper. And we've explored it in 4 ways, looking at it from a personal point of view, looking at it from our relationships, looking at it as we're building a community, and then looking at it from a global point of view. So so far we've covered freedom, creativity, joy, love, and this month we're starting on peace. And so we're going to be looking at peace today from that internal point of view. How can I bring more peace into my life? That song's part of it. Everything is holy now. So as I was preparing for this month's talks, I came across one of the books that I read several years ago, written by Wayne Dyer, and it's called The 10 Secrets for Success and Inner Peace. And he was, early on in his speaking and writing career, he was asked to give feedback or give advice to young people. And so he decided to write this book, specifically with younger adults in mind, on how to find simple ways of bringing more peace into your life. He also focused a little bit on success, but I want to talk about the peace part here today. And so he has 10 different keys to bringing more peace into your life. I'm not going to go through all of them because some of them do deal more with success than peace. But I thought I'd spend a little bit of time working with that today. As I was preparing, I'm also reading a book. I'm in the practice of studying for the Enneagram. I'm trying to learn more about that personality dimensions of the Enneagram. I happen to be a 2. If you know what a 2 is, well, it's a caretaker, it's the people pleaser, it's and you know what, that's caused a lot of problems in my life. So I'm busily exploring how I can relieve myself of some of those. But anyway, I was reading this book specifically on 2s in the Enneagram. And I came across this line that says, every thought we have moves us closer to or further from the life we most long for. Every single thought we have is either going to take us in the direction of what we want or it's going to take us away from it. And we are the only ones who control our thoughts. Good and the bad, both ways. So Wayne Dyer starts his book off talking about that. And he says, to have a mind that is open to everything and attached to nothing is his first key. Have a mind that is open to everything and attached to nothing. And he starts off with a quote from Michelangelo. The greatest danger is not that your hopes are too high and you fail to reach them. It's that they're too low and you do. What are we thinking? What are we saying for ourselves? What goals are we setting for ourselves? And what is it that we're wanting out of our lives? All of this determines how much inner peace we have, how much success we feel, how much love we bring into our lives, relationships we have, and our general sense of well-being in our life. What are our goals? What are we thinking about them? Are we striving to reach them? If they're too low, are they challenging enough for us? What is it that we are trying to bring into our lives on a daily basis? More and more of that. You know, I have a set of mugs at home and coasters that were given to me by a friend. And it says, with God, all things are possible. It's from Matthew, the book of Matthew in the Bible. With God, all things are possible. And when we spend our time more centered in spirit, then everything can unfold more easily for us. We can reach those goals that we set for ourselves that may seem unattainable. We can reach higher and further than we ever thought we could when we keep ourselves centered in spirit. So a mind that is open to everything and attached to nothing is a mind that is more peaceful, is more full of love. It's a mind that practices forgiveness on a regular basis. It's a mind that is generous. It is a mind that is respecting of all life. And it is a mind that can visualize or vision for the life that we want to lead. But when we are attached to it, things don't unfold very easily for us. I've discovered over the last few years that when I'm wanting to bring something into my life, I don't outline exactly what I want. I have some key things that I want, but I don't outline them. As I've said in the last service or so, I'm in the process of buying a house, and I signed the documents on Monday. But I started this process on April 4th. It will be 35 days, and I will have purchased a house. When I started the process, I had a couple things in mind. And I thought I knew exactly where I wanted to live, and I thought of everything, all the stuff was going to be perfect. But it turned out that it wasn't in the same location that I thought it was. But it's even greater than I could ever imagine it being, at a price better than I could imagine it being, with a 6% rebate on everything. It was a fabulous opportunity to do that, but I didn't outline everything. I had a few things that were, non-negotiables. It had to be one story, because I'm not doing stairs anymore. It had to have 3 bedrooms so I could have an office at home. And by not outlining it, I was able to find something that was even better than I could ever imagine it being. Those of you that got here earlier know that I'm a little hyper today. On Thursday, I did something else that was something it's been in my mind, it's been germinating, it's been brewing for the last 6 or 7 months, since the fall. I bought a puppy. So I'm receiving the puppy next week, I believe. They're still in the process of making the arrangements to get her to me. But I went into this with I had a few things I wanted, but I wasn't attached to what it was. I wanted a small dog, and I wanted a hypoallergenic dog, because I have friends that are allergic. And that was pretty much it. Those were my guidelines. And as I started looking on the sites for the breeders that I was interested in, reputable people, I wanted to make sure I didn't find something not reputable. Anyway, I just kept saying to myself, the right puppy's going to pop up when it's ready. Right puppy's going to pop up when it's ready. I had no idea it would happen so quickly, but I just happened to go on the site Thursday evening, and she was the first picture that came up. And I'm like, that's my dog. But even when I made the phone call and the arrangements, I wasn't attached to it. It was like, okay, if this works smoothly, this is my dog. If this doesn't work smoothly, it's not. I am not about pushing upstream, trying to get through to something. I am much more interested in going in the flow, allowing it to be easy and grace-filled, because I'm not attached to the outcome of it. There are certain few criteria here and there that are important to me, but I'm not attached to the final outcome as outlining it. I've taken classes and stuff where people say, well, you have to list every single thing that you want when you're doing your treatment. If you want a certain kind of car, then put that down there. Tell me what color you want, how many doors you want, what kind of seats you want. Does it have to be power steering? Does it have to have air conditioning? List all that stuff. Outline it. And that, to me, doesn't leave room for spirit to work. Now, we can add a phrase like this or something better, because that leaves us open at the end, or open at the top, I guess, to allow something better to come into our lives. But I found that if I'm not attached to a final product, to the perfect thing that I think I've created in my own limited thinking, then things unfold beautifully and easily. And that brings me a great deal of peace. Where if I'm struggling with it, I'm fighting to figure out what it is, I'm going to make this happen, I am in that constant turmoil, that battle to make it happen in my life. Attached to nothing. The second point that Wayne Dyer gives us is, don't die with your music still in you. Don't die with your music still in you. The amazing Khalil Gibran wrote, when he wrote his poem on work, he said, "When you were born, your work was placed in your heart." When you were born, your work was placed in your heart. Are you doing the work that is from your heart? Too often we think we have to do a certain thing, or we resign ourselves to doing a certain kind of work because that's all we think we can do. But is it truly the work of our heart? I think we can turn any job into the work of our heart if we are doing it with passion, if we're doing it with love, if we're doing it in service to others. I think any kind of job whatsoever can be our work of our heart. And I think we're very, very fortunate when we find that and can make a career of it and really begin to let our lives shine through our work. But again, too often we get stuck in what we think it should be. You know, we have this divided brain. We have this left side of our brain, the right side of our brain. The left side's very logical, oriented, figures things out, makes a plan, gets it done. The right side's flower child. It's out there just having fun. Creative, energetic. Which side of your brain is ruling your life? If we allow our right side of our brain to have a more dominant force in there, it doesn't mean that we ignore all of the day-to-day logical things that we have to get done. But maybe we find a more creative way of doing them. Maybe we can add a little fun into cleaning our house or paying our bills. Maybe we can begin to do it with a little more passion. When we listen only to the right side of our brain, the left side of our brain, which is over here. I'm very left-right challenged, just so in case anybody knows me. You can tell me to turn left all you want, and I'm going that way. It's your left. It's your left. I know people told me, okay, put your hand up so you have the L, right? Left? No, it doesn't work. So the left side of your brain is the judging side. It compares itself to others. And that leads us down that path of never feeling like we're adequate enough when we're comparing ourselves to other people in our lives. For the most part. We don't often compare ourselves to others and think we're better. Well, maybe we do, but when we rely on our left side of our brain so much to the exclusion of the right side of our brain, then we get into that pattern of being too much focus on what somebody else is doing instead of actually living from our true inner self, allowing our passion to come forth in our lives when we're working on the right side of our brain. You know, we wind up trying to go along with other people, trying to fit into a mold when we're working from the left side of our brain. To paraphrase Henry David Thoreau, he said that if you can't keep up with the companions that you're walking with, perhaps it's because you're marching to the beat of a different drum. We try to keep ourselves in line with other people around us, then we're not allowing ourselves the freedom and the expression that right side of our brain needs. Of course, Henry David Thoreau was a very interesting character. I was on a vacation in Massachusetts about 15 years ago, and we were doing the whole Concord tour where we were going to all the museums, Ralph Waldo Emerson and so forth. And the docent who was leading the tour was not a fan of Henry David Thoreau. She was telling us all these awful stories that the people of Concord thought about Henry David Thoreau because he was a little eccentric. I remember her telling us the story of him standing for 8 hours watching a frog on a sidewalk. And did you know that Henry David Thoreau was Ralph Waldo Emerson's handyman? And that Walden Pond was owned by Emerson? He let him stay there. She said, it sounds like he was out there in the woods for 2 years by himself. Well, it's 2 miles from town, and he used to come home every day for lunch with his mother. Like I said, she wasn't a fan of Henry. But what a way to live without worrying about other people around you. What a way to live and be that place of peace within yourself because you're not concerned with what other people are thinking so much. It's when we're talking about our work, we're looking at what is our passion. And our passion is generally what inspires us the most. And if we take a look at the word inspire, it comes from the Latin in spiritus, which means in God. So when we are inspired, we are in God. We are working through, the divine is working through us. We are in alignment with it when we are inspired. When we are working to our passion, we're working inspired. When you are inspired, you never have to ask what your passion is, because you're living it every day. It's what's showing up through you. It's what stirs your soul. It's what keeps you in harmony, balance. So what keeps us from living our passion? Generally, it's fear. Fear of somebody else's judgment, fear of the unknown, fear of disappointing people. It's fear. But when you have that connection with Spirit, when you have that deep love for yourself and for the divine, there's no place for fear to operate. There's that wonderful saying, fear knocked on the door, love answered, and nobody was home. Fear cannot exist where love is. And love is in place when we are connected and moving with Spirit. Just like in Spirit, the word enthusiasm means God within. God within. So when we have enthusiasm for our life, we are working from that place of divine connection within us. One of Wayne's key points is embracing silence. I don't think we can get to that place of inspiration or enthusiasm, that connection with Spirit, when we don't spend time in the silence. That's where we consciously commune with the divine. That's where the divine makes itself known in unusual ways, and usual ways, in perfect ways, and challenging ways. When we're in the silence, we can actually commune with that passion that's within us and watch it unfold through us. Mother Teresa said that God is a friend of the silence, and that we need the silence to be able to touch our souls and the souls of everyone else. Silence is so important that without it, things become chaotic in our lives. You just think about music, like the song Justin just played. It's not the notes that were important. It's the spaces in between them. If Justin was just playing notes with no space, it would sound like a cacophony of noise. It's the space, it's that little bitty pauses between the notes. Now, sure, we're going to notice if he hits one off key, but that's not as important as the pause between them. The pause between the notes. It's the same way for our inner peace. It is not so much the thoughts that come up, but the pauses in between them. I'm teaching a series on mindfulness right now, and that was the key point that I was stressing last Wednesday with the group I was working with, is looking for the pause between the thoughts, because our thoughts are going to come through our minds all the time. That's the way our minds are designed to work. They have a constant chatter going through them. Part of that is the ego trying to keep us safe, because the ego is full of fear. But when we can begin to expand the pause between the thoughts, we begin to expand the silence, then we can reach a greater and greater sense of peace in each moment. The breath is very important. By refocusing our attention to our breath and taking a conscious and slower breath, there's not a lot going on in our mind when we're focused on the breath. It gives us a space between the constantly chattering thoughts that we have going on in our minds. One of the things that those thoughts that are constantly going on in our minds is about our past. In our past is where we have guilt, shame, regret, anger. Our future's more where we have fear and worry. But the past is about the things that have already happened and our reaction to them, the thoughts that we are having about the past. And if we can begin to let go of some of the past, let go of that history, then we can begin to release that from our lives. And when we release it, we don't experience as much tension and turmoil. We begin to find a greater sense of peace. There are wonderful practices that we can do to help us release some of those things. One of them is a forgiveness practice. Well, any kind of forgiveness practice, but this one that I remember from Desmond Tutu's and his daughter Info's book called The Book of Forgiving is called The Fourfold Path of Forgiveness. It's a ritual that you go through. But one of the steps in that ritual is to take a stone and to tell your story, tell your past to the stone. That's powerful because we need to speak it out. We need to let go. Because if we're keeping it inside, we're afraid to say it, we're too angry to say it, it stays in us, it just gets stuck and stagnates within us. But if we speak it out, and speaking it out to a stone that's benign, non-reactive, no judgment from the stone. We speak our history to the stone. And then the next step in the process, right, I think is the third step, is to transform the stone into something else or release it altogether. And so she goes through this wonderful process of, making some kind of beautiful art project with your stone, where you take a story that was painful for you and you transform it into something of beauty. Or, like I said, you can release it. You can decide that you no longer want that story in your life and you release the stone and symbolically release the story too. But when we're stuck on our personal histories, when we are stuck in that, we cannot move on. It just becomes a force of itself. Because we're in the past, there's no place for God to operate. God is only present in the here and now. But if we stay stuck in the past to those kind of traumatic situations that we've been in, that's where we're going to stay. And there is no peace there. There's no room for peace there. Because all we can focus on is the hurt, the fear, and the anger of what happened then. Along with that, we get all kinds of labels put on us because of our past. Or we put them on ourselves. We attach ourselves as a failure or not a nice person or whatever thing it is that we're working with. And we kind of own that. We kind of own that ourselves. And when we own something like that, it really becomes part of our identity, and part of who we are and how we operate in the world. And I don't know about you, but if I'm feeling like I'm not a good person, I'm really not going to find any internal peace at all in my life, as long as I'm worked up over this past story that I've had. And so I have to begin to release the labels, release the stories, release all of those things that I've told myself or my family or friends have told me for however many number of years. Oftentimes this requires a change in consciousness, a change in how we work. There's the famous Einstein quote, you can't solve a problem at the level of consciousness that created it. We have to begin to evolve out of that consciousness, out of that state of consciousness. We usually work with 4 of the states of consciousness here at Centers for Spiritual Living, but Wayne has an interesting take on it. He calls it the 3 levels of consciousness. And the first one is the ego consciousness, and that's what I've been talking about. This past story, this left brain, this way of being that is limiting in our lives. The ego consciousness is primarily concerned with our body, with our personality. The ego consciousness has a strong, strong sense of separation. It can't hardly align itself with anything else. It's fighting for its own identity all the time. And it's what keeps us in the struggle. The ego consciousness is always competing, always trying to get more, trying to do better. In addition to the ego consciousness is the second one he calls the group consciousness. Because it's not just about what our own ego is telling us, it's about our group, our tribe, what they're telling us about ourselves. I don't know about you, but does anybody have any friends that like to keep them just exactly the way you are? They don't really like it when you change? Anybody have that? Yeah. That's the way our group consciousness works. It wants us to stay the same. Just like the ego likes everything to be the status quo, so does the group consciousness. And we operate at this group consciousness. Oftentimes it's our work, it's the groups we belong to, it's our family of origin, it's our chosen family, it can be our heritage, our racial identity, our ethnic identity, our religion, our nationality, our political affiliation. Any of those things can become a group identity that we are then operating from that too. But again, there's a lot of separation in that. Just by listing all those things, you feel the separation. If I say we're talking about political affiliation, then there's certainly 2, 3, 4 different camps of political affiliation that people belong to. And you know what a huge amount of separation that's caused in our world in the last 10 years. So you can just imagine this second form of consciousness, second level of consciousness, this group consciousness, is also about keeping us separate. It's not until we get to the third level, which is the mystical consciousness, that we actually end that sense of separation. That's when we become more aligned. That is what Wayne Dyer calls the problem-free consciousness. Because we feel connected instead of separate. And when we feel connected, we are inspired in spiritos. We are enthusiastic, enthos, with God, within God, God within us. When we are in that mystical consciousness, that state of unitive consciousness, then that's where peace exists. That's where we feel connected to people around us, even if we don't know them. That's when we feel connected to the earth, to the wonderful animals in our lives, to different groups of people. When we are working at a mystical consciousness, all those barriers dissolve. And that's when we can find true peace in our lives. One of the other things he talks about is that we need to let go of resentment. Just like I was saying before with the history. Some of those things that have happened to us in our lives build resentment within us. He said there is no justified resentment. You know, things happen to us. They happen to us all the time. How much of that are you letting control you? How much of those things are you letting be your influencing factor in your life, the things that have happened? In our 4 levels of consciousness, we would call this the victim consciousness, where we feel like something's been done to us. And we hold a resentment for it. But if we begin to let go of those resentments, we can move up into those different levels of consciousness. And you know, it's not just even resentment. Sometimes it's like, you know, being offended or feeling like we've been judged. If we're feeling offended, then we're also practicing judgment. If we're allowing somebody else to judge us, then we've also got that within us that's happening too. Otherwise, it would not have no effect on us. If we weren't feeling judgment ourselves and somebody else judged us, we would not react to it unless it was also within us. Some sense of this thing being true or the possibility of it being true. It would not affect us to the degree that it does unless there was some of it in there within us. And again, the way to get rid of this is to begin to practice forgiveness. Begin to practice forgiveness in a little bit different way. As I said, things happen. And they happen to all of us, all of the time. How much of it are we allowing to stay in us? You know, when a snake bites and injects its venom in you, it's not the bite that hurts you. It's the venom, the poison that you allow to remain in there. The snake bite is the snake bite. It's going to heal. But if we allow the venom, the poison, the sense of being offended or resentful or angry, if we allow that to stay in us, then that's what's going to cause the harm within our lives. Our task is always to suck that stuff out, get it out of us. One of the, as I said earlier, one of the things that is really important in our lives is to begin to develop that conscious connection with Spirit. And one of the ways that we can do this is through that practice of visioning, is to begin to visualize our life being the way that we want it to be. Begin to visualize bringing into our life things that will fulfill us and lead us to a little more passionate life. Visioning kind of activates the dormant forces that are within us. Visioning gives them a place to come up. In our practice of visioning, we go into the silence and we listen very deeply, and as we ask them certain questions, and then we listen for the answers, for the responses, and sometimes the responses come in in interesting ways. As we've been in the Vision Corps for so many years, we've experienced. I get smells a lot. When I go into visioning, I'll ask a question, and then I'll smell lemon or cinnamon or peppermint, things like that. The oils that I really like, they just come forth. Other people hear music. Some people actually see things. I'm not much of a person to see pictures, but I'll hear words or I'll get the sense of something as it's coming through. And of course, our natural inclination then is to try to analyze it. That's our left brain trying to figure things out. It wants to analyze it, figure out what's happening here. But if we give that impress of Spirit space to work in our lives, then we can watch amazing things happen. We can watch them transform in wonderful ways. I loved, Wayne Dyer had this interesting way of putting it. He said that when we are focused on the effect, focused on the outcome, focused on the form, then all we are getting is inform or information. When we focus on the form, we get back information. But when we align ourselves in Spirit, we get back inspiration. What a wonderful way of putting that so easily. If I am stuck on making sure I know how this thing's going to be, if I'm outlining the form of it, if I'm saying what it is I want, I am not giving room for Spirit to operate. But if I am in Spirit, then the inspiration can come through. And it can show up in whatever way it needs to for me. And the more that we begin to see ourselves becoming that thing that is filled with passion, that thing that is at peace with the past, that hasn't got a ton of worry over the future, then our lives become more inspired. And they become an inspiration for others as well as ourselves. And I think that's how we really begin to change the world, is to be that place within ourselves first, where Spirit has a place to operate. One of his last keys for success is to treasure your divinity. And he starts off with this quote, which goes back to our opening song here, from Einstein. There are two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle, and the other is though everything is a miracle. When we can begin to understand that there is not one place where Spirit is not indwelling it, there is not one thing that is not possible when we are consciously connected to Spirit. When we remember that Spirit is a presence and not a particular person, when we realize that Spirit is always unfolding itself for our highest and greatest good, then there's no room for us to attach any judgment to it. There's no room for us to say, oh, this is good or this is bad, or I don't want this or this is what I want. when we are aligning ourselves in that conscious union with the divine, then amazing things unfold for us. You know, you are a divine creation. You showed up in exactly the perfect place and time for you to be. And you will leave here in exactly the right place and time for you. Our lives are a wonderful unfoldment of Spirit. Spirit is constantly working itself through us, not as our body, not as our personality, but as a miracle. An amazing, perfect miracle. You know, oftentimes we say that we are God. I am that I am. We're not saying that from a place of better than anything else. We're not above anyone else. We're totally in alignment with Spirit. We have a sense of that eternal connection to our source. And it doesn't leave us. Never runs dry. Cannot be extinguished or depleted in any way. That sense of that divine connection, that perfection that exists right in us, right here and right now, is always there. And it's perfect just the way it is. So I like to do a little spiritual practice with ours. And so, as I've said a couple times here, visioning. So visioning is generally a longer process, but I just wanted to give you a little taste of it today. Just a little taste of visioning. So this is a meditative process. It'll take us about 3 or 4 minutes to do this. So if you are willing to play along with me, I invite you to close your eyes. And just take in a couple nice deep breaths. Just go to that place in your body, in your consciousness, in your environment where you feel at ease, where you feel connected, where you feel at peace with all that is. And knowing that we are always connected, always at one with the divine. Knowing that that love intelligence is moving through us always, in all ways. Just simply ask the question, why am I here? What is my purpose? And then just take a moment and listen in the silence. If you find your mind drifting, just ask the question again. Why am I here? Or what is my purpose? Now just taking a deep breath. And just allow whatever came to you to just be. Don't try to figure it out or analyze it. Just listen to it, And then over the next week, just notice. Notice what you see. If anything aligns with it. If anything shows up. If you haven't, you can open your eyes. Let's take this into prayer. I'm going to invite our spiritual practitioners to stand. These beloveds spend at least 4 years in study and practice to be of service to our community, to themselves. And so I just turn within to that place of deep connection. That place in my heart center where I know that all is one. Where I feel that love intelligence, that creative dynamic energy that is moving through me and manifesting itself as me. This is a place of deep peace. And knowing that I am one with the divine, I know that I am that presence of peace and love and joy. I know that creativity and freedom are moving through my life right here and right now. And as I know this is true for me, I know this is true for everyone. For each of you present here today, for each of you that are joining us online, for everyone who hears this, and everyone who doesn't. For there is no separation of spirit and life. And so knowing this truth, I speak my word. I know that each one of us is a perfect and divine emanation. I know that each one of us is an actual miracle. And that we have been brought here to fulfill a unique purpose. A passion that is wanting to birth itself through us. As only it can. Through each one of us individually. And I know that as we align ourselves with this sense of purpose, and we allow this passion to move itself into our experience, we then experience a great sense of peace. That peace exists within us right here and right now. We don't need to add anything to ourselves. We simply need to let it unfold through us. And as we open ourselves to greater and greater ways of doing this, we feel more and more of that eternal peace. Every single moment of our life is an opportunity to experience peace. Are we allowing it? I know that as we align ourselves in conscious union with the divine, this process becomes easier and easier. And it is unfolding itself in greater and greater ways at all times. How good it is to know this, how good it is to feel this, and how good it is to see it operating in this community right here and right now. I just give great thanks for the presence of the divine moving itself into fruition through each and every one of us. And I release this word into the law, to that creative mind that always says yes, that has no limitations, that is always unfolding for the highest and greatest good of everyone. I let it go, and I let it be. And together we say, and so it is. Amen.